Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast. My name's Stu Turtley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. We got us some really interesting conversation today. I have been on this gentleman's podcast before. Absolutely love everything that he is doing. I'm going to introduce him here in a sec, but let's tee this up. 2024 is shaping up to be one of the single best, most entertaining years of our lives. There's a lot going on. We just had COP28, in which there was a lot of big oil showed up, and there was a lot of green people showed up, and their heads were exploding. David Blackman just put out there's going to be a resurgence in nuclear around the world. In my opinion, I think we're going to have nuclear not really in the US because of the legislation through regulation, but we're seeing a resurgence in nuclear, like Dubai just put out, or excuse me, the UAE just put out a nuclear reactor. So then you're going to have natural gas. Natural gas is really kicking off around the world. And I've got a fantastic energy expert here today. I've got Shane Stolp, and he is absolutely the CEO of Wescom, and they know energy. They know solar. They know oil and gas, and I love them. Welcome, Shane, and thanks. I'm so glad you're here today.
Well, thanks, Stu. I'm excited to be on here and talk about Energizing America and how we need all these forms of energy. And boy, there's an untold story behind the headlines. And unfortunately, as Americans and folks around the world, we just love the headline. And it's so easy to buy into that headline, isn't it? It's incredible that even the things you just said, there's so much behind all of that to unpack. And what you and the Sandstone Group are doing, and including David Blackman, all the folks that are out there using the Substack and getting this message out, we can't get enough of it. It's awesome. So thanks for having me on to tell the story.
Isn't that? I'll tell you a couple things. You also are a podcast host, and this is really awful, Shane, because you had me on your show, and I got real busy because I was going to have you back. But tell us about your podcast, and then we're going to go into what you're seeing in the energy space.
Yeah, right. So our podcast, Energizing America, is just how we need energy in our life in all forms of energy. And sometimes we talk about business energy, just different business tactics. And, I'm part of a group that grew from zero to a few hundred employees out in the oil patches and love to tell a story about blue collar workforce. So that's a big piece of it. We talk about solar. I have solar at my house. I got solar at my shop. 90% of my work, though, comes from oil and gas. So, we got an EV vehicle. So we talk about EV vehicles sometimes. We just talk all things energy. Sometimes we get politicians in to talk about their opinions and blab what they have to say about things. We have Pete Stauber is a representative of ours from Minnesota. He's been a great guest on our podcast. And then sometimes we get lucky enough to get people like you come on and talk about some of the world events around oil and gas and just the all-in energy approach. So our podcast, Energize in America, really started just with the mission of sharing the need for energy and sharing the story behind the folks who produce it, because there's so many awesome people out there talking about the human part of energy and how important that is. And sometimes it gets forgotten that it actually takes humans behind the energy to even produce it, right? I love this idea of, oh, let's just go all electric. I love electricity. I'm an electrician, right? This is great. The problem here is that folks forget we have to produce the electricity. So somehow they think if they're not using their gas vehicle, the electricity just magically shows up. None of them, very few of them actually understand that electricity has to be generated, by the way, which is oftentimes most affordably done via coal, natural gas, you name it. It's very rarely done by a renewable source. There's some of it, right? If we could have more nuclear like you started with, we'd be great. But there's that untold story of the humans behind there that are producing that energy, all forms of it.
Hug your lineman.
They're going to need those hugs.
Absolutely, because the FERC just put out, Shane, that the U.S. grid is not doing too hot because of the sustainable or the renewable energy that is not sustainable being put on. Texas is having to put in, we're using more coal now than we've used. Carrie is trying to shut all that down. And you were just talking, you're up in the middle of the tundra up there and you are having snow. You're not getting any solar today, are you?
No, and so this is a cool part about actually having solar, right? When we started our podcast of Energizing America and really trying to get the message out, people would ask me about solar, and I didn't have enough details about it. And I'm a reader; I can read a lot about solar, but I love when I get to experience it. So we made an investment here at our shop, put solar in. I got a monitor out front; it shows how much solar energy we're producing. I
Yep.
got it at my house on my roof, same thing. But I'm telling you, in July and August, great up in northern Minnesota. December, January, February, not so great. We get a lot of snow, and it's not cool unless you get your solar panels cleared off. And then it's only 6 hours of sunshine. So unless you have a big battery bank system, which is totally unaffordable, and oh, by the way, we also sit on the biggest copper deposit in the world, pretty much up here in the northern half of the U.S. But guess what? We can't mine it. That's a whole other matter. So we don't have affordable ways to storage the energy. So
Right.
it's awesome to have real data, Stu, to talk to people about that. When they say, "Oh, you're in the oil and gas, what's wrong with you?" What do you mean, what's wrong with me? I'm actually making sure that you get up this morning. Like for me this morning, I woke up. First thing I did is hit my, oil produced phone, started my pickup because it's 18 degrees out there at the lake. Started the pickup, hit the floor. Ooh, I like that nice tile heat. My
Right.
obviously my propane boiler is working away. Out the door I go and get that fossil fuel ridden pickup, which is a really, really nice way to drive compared to the electric vehicle in northern Minnesota with this temp is not so warm. The electric vehicles are so fun, Stu. I'm sure you've ridden them. They're so fun. But when it's 20 degrees out, they're not very fun. They're
Shane,
cold
I
and they
want to
don't get
ask
rain.
this because my in-laws, the green side, why is it you and I can have this conversation? I love all forms of energy, has to be sustainable. You can't print money. Where the global economy is now facing horrible things. But do you see up in northern Minnesota this conversations of religion around the quote unquote renewable side? And I love my oil and gas folks, love oil and gas because they're the Texas Rangers of energy, as far as I'm concerned. I don't care where you are in the U.S. If you're drilling a rig, I love you. I don't care if you got mud all over you. I'm going to come hug you, and it's because I realize that's low cost energy. But what kind of conversations do you have when you're talking to folks? Is it just
Or they're
one-sided?
fascinating conversations, Stu, and people are so uneducated in this. They're so opinionated on something that they have no knowledge of. For
Right.
example, I'm at the local elementary school. We're getting set up for a carnival. Me and this gal open up conversation. What do you do for a living? She says, I protest. I said, really? What do you protest? She says, oh, things like the Enbridge Line 3 project. And I say, oh, really? This is going to be fun. And because, politeness, she asks me, now, what do I do? And I said, well, I run an energy services company that primarily works in oil and gas in North Dakota. Exactly what you're protesting against us trying to transport. And so then we have this lively conversation, but super, if you try and meet them where they're at, like, hey, so tell me why you're protesting, right? Well, I
Right.
believe I want to take care of the waters. Oh, you do realize most of the oil and gas that we import comes from overseas over the beautiful ocean. Does that not concern you? Because if it does, it seems like you would want it to go on a pipeline underneath American soil where we have good regulation and good things in place, right? And eventually, by the end of the night, she's actually coming around. And my boys, when we get in the pickup, they go, boy, Dad, I wanted to wring her neck, But yet, by the end of the night, she's totally understands that. Yeah, that's true. She actually drove her car to the event. She didn't walk. So my question to her is, why didn't you walk here if you truly believed in it? You got to be all in. And so you have to somehow meet folks where they are. Here's what's fascinating, though. There's a conversation over in northern Minnesota. Terrible. There's so many environmental groups with just a one-sided agenda that are all focused on climate change without knowing the facts of it. You get over to North Dakota, which is one of my favorite spots in the world. I'm there all the time. You can have real conversation with real people who, by the way, this is what never is told. The oil and gas folks out there, they're some of the best environmentalists you could ever find. Because guess who's out there hunting? Guess who's out there fishing? Guess who's out there using the outdoors? It's those folks. While the environmentalists are chaining themselves up to some painting somewhere about some godforsaken thing that no one even cares about. They don't even use what they're trying to protest with.
Did you
Our
see the
team,
one that glued their hand to the pavement and
oh,
they had to cut the pavement out and then he lost his hand?
karma. It has a weird way of taking care of things, doesn't it? But this idea of just trying to meet folks where they're at, that Minnesota came out with this big, net zero goal by 2030. So local utilities increasing their costs by 10, 20% a year. You can't get a handle on it. And finally, it seems like people are getting hit in the pocketbook where it counts. And all of a sudden they're going, maybe this isn't the best strategy, right? Maybe we need to do something differently. But unfortunately, the train has departed the station and we're too far gone in northern Minnesota. I don't know what's going to happen, and it's in the whole state. It's terrible. One of the highest tax states, and energy cost is not even, they don't consider that a tax. If they did, we would be worse than California and we'd be one of the top in the nation. It's terrible. But I do believe with the right set of circumstances, which is one, cold weather, that has a way of keeping things very real when it comes to energy. You guys experienced it in Texas a few years back.
Couple
When
hundred
it
feet.
gets cold, yeah, when it gets cold, people pay attention. So cold weather, that's one thing. The second thing is cost. Hit people in the pocketbook. And I'm telling you, up here, the energy costs are getting out of control. And we have oil and gas all over. There's no reason for it.
I did not know that. I knew that the legislation through regulatory action is now weaponized against the American citizen, and it's sad. Look at New
Yep.
York.
So we try and get, even one of the things we've tried to do, Stu, is try and get these kids, they're in an education system where this stuff is being, they're being told from day one that, oil and gas is any fossil fuel. We don't even have to say oil and gas, right? It's fossil fuel. It's just an absolute attack on any natural resource use, right? Other than solar and wind. They're being told bad, bad, bad. So we grab a solar panel, we grab our Wescom tent, we head to the local elementary school every spring. We have the kids outside, we got a little fan and a light on the thing. We leave it out in the sun. The kids get to touch it. They get to learn about raceways and electrons and everything. And then we shove it under the tent and they realize what happens when the sun goes down. It's a very real thing. And I tell them, we don't have a windmill because we don't have enough wind up here, but it's the same exact thing with wind. So what we're trying to do is give these kids a little opportunity, even at a younger age,
Hands on.
understand that there's probably more to it than what they're being told.
How cool is that?
It's one of the funnest days of the year.
I'll tell you, I'm trying to get, we're just covered over with work, but we have a homeschool initiative at Sandstone that we're trying to take all of our podcasts, put tests on them for the high school students and junior high and high school for energy, because a lot of the talks of the guests that we have are phenomenal. I learned so much, I even though I went to Oklahoma State, and that's a little bit of a handicap sometimes. I'm kidding. I love my college, but they did graduate people that couldn't read, but that's a whole nother story. But we'll leave that alone. And anyway, but I love the idea of giving back and educate the next generation. As a big employer, Shane, are you having trouble finding energy employees out there?
Well, we've struggled with employees overall, just like everyone has in today's world, right? It's a tough deal. I'm pretty proud those two. When my brother and I got going in this, we had 5 employees. We now have over 250. And these folks are so committed to the energy industry. One of the secrets we've done though is, and it's not even a secret, we just have the conversation. Guys, don't be ashamed of what you do. Let me tell you, I interviewed Luke Wartz. He works for Marathon Oil, a massive producer over in the Bakken. He's a children's author. He's got the coolest kids' books ever. So I give anyone, anytime someone has a baby around here, they get a little baby outfit from me and they get a couple kids' books about oil and gas and how important it is. And I try and tell everyone at Westcom,
Right.
embrace what you do, because guess what? We wouldn't be where we are without you. I would not be warm in my bed at night without oil and gas. I just simply wouldn't do it. I would not have this nice shirt on without oil and gas. I
Right.
would have nothing. Look at the difference between the Liberty CEO does such a great job in this, is in his annual reports.
Chris Wright. Love
Chris
Chris
Wright
Wright.
is phenomenal in this, in talking about the low cost, affordable energy, what it does, and that's why America is what it is. And it's a shame that we're not allowing other countries to follow suit. Once we got it, we don't want other folks to do. So we try and tell our employees, Embrace what you do, go home, brag about what you do, tell your coworkers or your co-PTA members, tell the folks at the football game, embrace what you do and learn the facts about it. A lot of folks just don't even
Right.
realize how impactful their work is. So that's why even our motto of Energizing America came to be. We used to just I don't know what our motto was 10 years ago, maybe safely serving the best oil companies, right? Whole lane. No,
Right.
what are we actually doing? We're like saving lives. We're energizing in America. Think about how cool that is and embrace that. And through that, I think our folks feel very fulfilled at work. And then, oh, by the way, we happen to have this year became employee owned. So my brother and I put all the shares of the company into a trust fund, and you earn the shares
Way.
through your efforts of working. You don't buy the shares, you can only earn them. And so, yeah, we're an employee stock owned company, and folks get to own the company they work for. So that's also been very helpful for those employees.
You know what? I'm about to tear up. I feel like Lee
That would be
Green.
a first.
Yeah, Lee Greenwood, America. I'm breaking into my America, Texas, America.
Yeah.
How cool is that, man?
Well, Stu, here's the thing. See, this is what we get to tell now about this. Everyone who has this agenda, we kind of lump people together, right? Green Initiative, DEI, ESG, all those folks kind of get thrown in this big pile, right? But once you start stripping that pile out and you go, wait, you care about ESG. Let me tell you about environmental social governance. At Wescom, a company of a few hundred people doing several $1 million a year in revenue, our employees own the company. Go find me a green company that only does solar who's employee owned. You will not find them. You will not find them. How come you're not talking to them? Right? Oh, you care about taking care of, the environment. Go find a company that has 90% of their staff out there hunting, fishing, and doing all the kinds of things that we should be doing with our natural resources. And by the way, I got 20 people, one set of folks out in North Dakota, all they do for a major producer is go back and fix burn back and flares to do better for the environment. That particular producer spent over $10 million last year. 10
Nice.
million in the Bakken shale play. So if you want to talk about people who care about an environment, we're all in.
Oh, isn't that great? Hey, let me ask this. And I'm sorry, I would give you a man hug right now because I just love everything that you got going on. You're a humanitarian first. Let me ask this because Bitcoin, I love Bitcoin, and there's a whole political reason behind it. And when you sit back and take a look, I love the Bitcoin miners because it gives the EMP operators additional income if they put a mining operation on stranded gas, or if they're flaring out and they can't get a pipeline out because of the regulatory kind of issues. I mean, this is a round robin. Are you seeing any Bitcoin mining up there? And I do love Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, we are. We're seeing, we were involved in a fairly large project last year that did a lot of taking stranded gas. North Dakota, about 25 to 30% of their production comes right off the Indian reservation. The Indian
Wow.
reservation has some power. They have some takeaway capacity issues from the natural gas, and then subsequently they also have some uh, political issues in getting the local utility to bring power in. So there's
Yes,
kind of
I
a
read
perfect
about that. Yes.
there's a perfect storm going on where they can use this gas to create like a little mini power grid and do something, right? One of which could be putting it back on the line or Bitcoin mining. I would say 20% of our sites we find Bitcoin mining anymore on because of one of our producers is really into it. They're using a
Nice.
ton of that gas. Some constraints with it, Stu. You know how it is in the oil and gas. Sometimes the gas is coming out and it's flowing perfectly, and then all of a sudden
Right.
the well runs into an issue. The gas shuts down. You got a lot of infrastructure costs in that Bitcoin.
Right.
North Dakota state regulators have been a little bit tough on the Bitcoin miners. A lot of the Bitcoin miners want to import their computers and different components from China. They're not UL listed. That makes things
Oh,
complicated a little bit. But I think we've worked through a lot of those challenges. There was just one project last year that, out of all the ones we were involved, that didn't go as quite as well as they would have hoped. So
right.
now they're moving that setup. The beautiful thing about that Bitcoin mining, and so when in the shell play, We start the well up, right? Lots of oil comes out, and then as it ages, more and more gas starts to come out. Now, what do? North Dakota has a massive takeaway issue. It's brewing. If they don't figure it out by
Yes,
2028, we're going to be in a world of hurt. They're going to have to curtail production, which would be terrible. So
those regulations are coming out, Shane. So
so bad. You talked to Lynn Helms, the director of mineral resources there. He's done phenomenal. I think uh in 20 years, they used to produce 100,000 barrels of oil a day. They're now over 1 point, almost hitting 2 million. And he says by the time it's 2 o'clock in the morning, they've produced more oil than when he first started in his job, right? And
great.
what they did in a 24-hour day. But this Bitcoin mining is a great way to take care of some of that natural gas takeaway capacity issue. At the same time, produce revenue for folks.
And get rid of the emissions. And then, so here's, I get excited when I'm talking ESG, making money and saving and putting power and all that. I would love to interview your customer that you did do that and really kind of educate our listeners more about the goodness of Bitcoin mining if we can get that kind of a thing scheduled, because people think, oh, Bitcoin mining is bad. And if the digital currency from a government kicks in, it's not good. And I'm sorry, but you're going to see. Here's a prediction, Shay, and I want your opinion on this too. I think Bitcoin's off, getting ready to run to the races.
I think it's went through enough of its cycles that it has to test the highs and the lows. It seems like it's within the next couple of years, it's going to be here to stay, and it's going to be a growing asset. The thing is, we have to. This is where it gets so complicated for folks. They get so singular minded rather
Right?
than taking this all in approach. And this is why all the podcasts that Sandstone Group does and all the publications and everything are so important to be involved in. It's an all in approach. We're considering all the elements and pulling it all together, of which Bitcoin mining has a place and can do
Yes.
phenomenal things. I had an employee one time who, well, he still works for me, and he works over in Minot, or lives over in Minot, North Dakota, and he
Yeah.
was Bitcoin mining in his basement. And he was telling me his electric bills were out of this world, right? Meanwhile, 65 miles away, there's a well that's just has nowhere to put the gas, so it's just flaring off into the atmosphere,
Right.
wasting all kinds of energy. They could put a Connex right there with some computers in it, get some Bitcoin mining going. It's a win-win for all parties involved. There's some infrastructure costs, but here's the thing. They've gotten so good with Bitcoin mining now, we can basically, this is modular. You can pick these things up as
Oh,
that goes
yes.
bad and it doesn't have the gas takeaway anymore. Pick it up, move it down the road to the next well that does have some takeaway issues, right? What I
Yep.
wish is that we could get that Bitcoin mining going down in the Permian Basin. Been very slow adopters down in the Permian Basin to
Yes.
Bitcoin mining. However, they have a lot better takeaway capacity. They don't have the same issue with flaring as we have up north. But they're headed there, right? If it's the same, of course, the geology always depends where you're at, but more than likely they're going to start experiencing what the Bakken Basin has experienced, which is gassier wells over time. What do we do with this takeaway capacity?
Right. He said gassier. Just kidding. You have 7 boys, so I figured.
We yes,
No,
yeah.
I'll tell you, BitDeer we're working on and maybe signing up as a sponsor of the show. And I'm trying to get the executive in here, and we're working on a nice marketing budget for next year. And they're the biggest Bitcoin miner out of Singapore, and they are not really in the investor market, which we're trying to help with. So, I'm really looking forward to visiting with you more about the Bitcoin up there, because I think that's a huge win for ESG. I didn't think about it that way a couple of years ago.
No, well, what's funny? I was in a hotel in Utah, North Dakota. This was back in 2016. We did
Right.
a Christmas party at this hotel. I was headed up to my room, and a guy gets in the elevator, and we start talking. And what do you do? He says, Bitcoin mining. I said, what? And he starts telling about how he's going to do this. I ain't kidding you. I told my brother that night, that guy is crazy. By the morning, I told him, Jeremy, I wonder if that guy ain't onto something. 4 years later, in
Yeah.
2020, he had over 30 wells that he had Bitcoin mines set up on, and he was doing very, very well. Now we know that Bitcoin mine,
Right.
profitability in Bitcoin can go up and down,
Oh,
right? But if you're producing it for free, then it's just a matter of how long you're willing to hold it and when you're willing to sell it, like any investment.
oh, the cost per kilowatt hour goes this the conversation, Shane, goes back around. Humanity needs the lowest cost kilowatt per hour to get it out of humanity, to get it to elevate out of poverty, kind of like Chris Wright said over at Liberty that you mentioned. I mean, he's the one that set the tone for the Energy Newsbeat podcast, humanitarian. And then Alex Epstein was also the same way. You know, I got to interview both of them a couple of times, and I love both of them. So, you know, they helped set how I was like going, a light went off. So this conversation of the lowest kilowatt per hour for ESG, for Bitcoin mining, for finances has come back around to this circle of humanity to in order to elevate people out of poverty.
Well, and because it's so important, Stu, people, again, they're not thinking about every kilowatt of energy has to be produced. And so what
Right.
does it cost to produce it? Who's paying for it? Newsflash, the government doesn't just give you free energy. Now, they've gotten very creative in tax credits and everything else, but we have yet to see where they go to the local homeowner and they say, you know what, due to our added regulation, we're just going to go ahead and start taking care of your power bill. It's not going to happen, folks. You're going to take care of your own power bill. Our utility over here in northern Minnesota tells us when we're talking about paybacks with solar systems, plan on a 3% annual rate hike from here until 2050. But you know what they do every year when they go to the legislature? They ask for a 13 to 22% rate increase. That's
Wow.
the reality of what they're after. And folks are going to just, they're going to cost themselves right out of affordable energy. And you might not think it doesn't matter. And this is one other thing that I always tell our elementary kids when we're out talking to them and our coworkers. Okay, for us in the oil and gas business, for us who have able-bodied minds and healthy bodies, and we can go make a living, and we're maybe middle class or a little above, you probably really don't. It's easy to say you don't really even hardly care. Oh well, your power bill went up 4%, right? What I'm talking about is the same people who I'm lumping in this pile who are after ESG are the very people that oftentimes can't afford that rate increase. We do
Right.
energy scholarships as Wescom, part of our ESG
Oh,
movement.
nice.
We do every year. We call a couple of the elementary schools. We say we want 4 families. Who can we pay their power bills for 4 months? We send $1,000 to the local utility company
Right.
for that family to help out with their energy costs, right?
How
Because
cool is
that's
that?
where it's bad. Those folks that are living in the right on the edge, and guess what? That's most of us living right on the edge financially. And now we're going to go ahead and increase your price because why?
Why? Yeah.
There's no reason for it in today's world. With this abundance of energy we have, there's no reason for it.
You nailed what's happening in New York right now. Governor Hochul put out 4 months ago, Shane. They are having to increase. She said you're going to have a 20% increase in energy this year. Then you're going to have another 20%, and then you're going to have 100%. So like I said, I went to OSU. 20 plus 20 plus 100, that gets expensive. I don't care who you are. I mean, that's bad.
Well,
And
and Stu, it's 20 on top of 20, 100 on top of that 40, right?
exactly, yes.
It's bad. We don't even have to go to college to know that. But I think that's a cool part about these podcasts that we can do. Think about the medium we have today to help share the story. But
Yes.
there's action required on everyone's part. And that's even at our Christmas parties this year as we're out talking about where we're headed as a country and what we're doing. And even as a company, as part of this, we're just a small little speck. But you get to decide how big your speck becomes. How many people are you
Right.
sharing your story with? How much of an impact are you making? And
Right.
each one of us has a role in that.
Your podcast, I love what you do, Shane, because you are the epitome of the backbone of the U.S. I'm serious. If we can help you and everything else, I'm surprised by the success of our podcast. I'm humbled by it. We have so much great feedback, and it's podcasters helping spread the word. People are tired of the mainstream media. You need to interview JP Warren. He's also written a book. I love JP. JP is cool cat.
Yeah,
And
he is.
so you need to interview him. And I guarantee I want to interview the other author that you have about his child's book. And maybe we get both of them, all four of us, on a child's book panel. I think that would be absolutely a fun hoot.
Well, and I have had this conversation also with our team. Here's the cool part about being in America. There might be in today's world ways that we get stopped or try to be stopped, but we're such a country of ingenuity. There's always a workaround. There's always a workaround.
Right.
I was born in North Dakota, grew up in Duluth, Minnesota. My dad never went to college. He was a boiler operator, which was oftentimes just a fancy title for a generator. Him and Ma, they raised all 9 of us kids, 7 boys, 2 girls. I end up with 7 boys and 2 girls myself. And here's
What's
the
in the
thing.
water up there, dude?
It's good stuff because I'm telling you, it's an awesome life, Stu. Imagine last night I was out on the lake with my 7 boys playing hockey. It was magical, and the girls are inside with mom. It's a wonderful life. Here's the thing, though. Mom and dad hardly had any ability to even pay for all 9 of us. We grew up in an environment that was tough. It was bumpy. 1980s economy sucked. We went out. Dad, the only way he survived the 80s was by moving us out to North Dakota, being part of the coal gasification plant,
Right.
before he came back in the 90s to Duluth here and raised all of us. My point is I started with nothing, absolutely nothing. And my brother and I got involved in this business when there was 5 of us. We just loved oil and gas. We loved the industrial feel. We loved the American strap on your boots. And the people we've been able to meet in this industry are just phenomenal. Doesn't matter if you're in North Dakota, New Mexico, or over here in Minnesota. We got an office in Wisconsin. We've
Wow.
worked all across every single state nearly. We had West Coast pipeline this year. We had an East Coast pipeline that we worked on. We're all over the place. And there's such incredible people that are just like me. All they're doing is putting on their boots and giving it their best. And some
Right.
of us get really, really lucky. We end up owning a business with just some of the most incredible people ever. And then the cream on the top is that we get to give it back to them. We get to give the company to them so that they can take the future rewards. There's so much of that here, and we forget that. We can get frustrated with all the noise and all the headlines and everything else. Go turn it into action. Do something about it. Get involved. Listen to that podcast. Tell somebody about it. Whatever you do, we can do it.
I'm fired up. Okay, we're going into 2024 and I'm fired up. For our podcast host, Shane leaned forward into his chair and we're getting ready to run down that road. I guarantee you we're going to have a blast, Shane. I cannot wait to see you again.
Yes, thank you, Stu. It's been awesome. We got to keep this message alive.
Oh, I'll tell you what, preach on, preach on.
Well, my wife always says, settle down. Not everyone cares as much as you do. And I said, no, they do. Just have not ignited their passion. See, that's the
Yes.
thing. Everyone wants the same thing, a nice, safe home. At
Right.
the end of the day, we all enjoy that, right? What are some of the critical components of that? A good job, boy, get in the energy business. Because if you want a growing business,
Right.
a growing industry over the next 10 years, don't matter
Right.
if you're in fossil fuels, green movement, whatever you want to call it, lineman,
Yep.
think about the transition that we are under. Whether you agree with it or not, there's a massive future.
Electrification is here.
It's here. How we're going to produce electricity, that's where the fun is. But there's tons of future in that, right? So how
Right.
easy is that to talk about? Everyone likes to be warm. Well, that requires that energy. That's an easy conversation. All of this is such an easy conversation, and everyone has the same goal. We just got to learn how to ignite that passion within them. When we do, boy, you can move mountains.
I'll tell you what, you made my day today, Shane. And I will keep a pledge to you is keep heckling you and bugging you on LinkedIn, sharing your stuff. And I want to help you out in any way that I possibly can. Let's do some of these other panels.
Yeah.
I really am excited to do some of those and let's get the word out there. How do people find Westcon and how do people find your podcast?
Yeah, wescominc.com is where you'll find everything about Wescom, including our Energizing America podcast. Energizing America podcast is on every platform you can find. Come join the conversation. It's a fun one. We need everyone involved.
Isn't
And
that fun?
Stu, I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you again. Your passion for the industry and everything you guys are doing, please keep it up because we just want to be a small piece of the conversation.
Oh, you're a huge piece. So thank you very much. I appreciate you. We'll talk soon, Shane.
Thanks, Stu.